It's time to put the finishing touches on our little teaching sock for our Learning to Knit Socks, Sock Knitting 101. You turn it inside out. You inspect everything. We start at the toes. We get this tail threaded through a yarn sewing needle. Put one hand inside, and you want to study a little bit. You want to study the shape and the path of the stitches, for you're going to sew over them as if you're knitting them. See here? This thread will go over, across, needle goes in, but where does it go then? It goes under this next little bridge. Then it'll come over to the left. See how it goes over here and comes back under this bridge. You continue across, you follow the shape of the knitting stitches you had made. Come over here. Come under here. So just follow the knitting pathways that you have already established for a few stitches. You can go all the way across, or you can stop here. Weave this in with a few double turns. Now, if you're using pure wool yarn that will felt, you can, on your first hand washing of your project, you can use some soap and give it extra attention and felt in the end. If you're using a blended yarn that's not pure wool and will not felt, then you will want to carefully make a couple of double turns that are like a flattened knot. You don't want real big knots in your socks, but a flattened knot will help you weave in the end. You saw how I just doubled it and went in and on itself. I'll do it again. If that moved too fast, you'll see it again, for we will do that again. Here was a beautiful edge of this heel flap and the heel turn. This is where we joined the collar. Remember, the stitches were stretching and it felt like a gap. We're going to follow this stitch and reknit it with our sewing needle. That will secure the stitch in place and close the gap. When you get very experienced in knitting socks, you're going to use a thin yarn and the thin knitting needles. But for now, it's easier to see what's happening when I use thick yarn to show you. So that is why this specific project of a teaching sock is done with thick yarn. You have big stitches to see easily what is going on. And you just trace. This sewing here is like tracing. You're tracing your stitches with your sewing needle and yarn. Again, you don't want knots, so let's do that. Turning on itself again. Here, I turn it back on itself once, then I'll do it again here. Twice. It's like a flattened knot, and then I feed the yarn through and hide it inside and cut it off. Again, you can try to felt it in with some hot soapy water if you're using pure wool yarn, but if not, you will want to do these careful stitches here. tracing, and then twisting it on itself once, twisting it on itself twice. By the way, twisting it on itself is not a technical term. It's just the phrase that helps me remember it easily. I'm using these ways of describing the work to encourage you to not worry about too many fancy technical terms if they're hard to remember. Some people love them and they make it easier for them to remember things, but some people get a little bored with them. So invent your own terms. Okay, there are more of these to do in the same way with tracing the stitches, but I want to show you how to close the gap where the first foundation round was connected. So you want to look here. Look how you went around. You have 1, 2, back, front, back. That means now shall come front. Here is that front. See, I had front, back, front. There would be back here and front here. And now I can come back. Back, front. Again, it's like tracing, like you had a picture you wanted to trace. Now it's all flat. And now you can take your yarn and go through the next stitch, and we trace on this side. So we come up here and follow the path of the yarn. This one is very short. I'm going to let it go like this, and I'm going to secure it with this longer one. This might happen to you as well. Sometimes you're tracing the stitches, you run out of yarn, so you're going to take this end, you're going to lay it flat, and you will trace the stitches with the longer tail over it. Here I trace this way. I come back, put it down to hide it inside, come up, keep tracing my stitch, okay, I decide where I want to finish. That is where I do this. Leave the loop, turn it back on itself, make that flattened knot. Can do it again. Leave the loop before you pull it out, turn it back on itself, flatten it, then push your needle through to hide the end. It's nice and flat. It's not going to bother me while I walk. I cut this off. And I keep working, have a couple more to weave in. Tracing those stitches. You can definitely look up the technical names for all of these things I'm showing you. They're fun, they're interesting, but for some people, they're not that interesting. What happens if you tie the knot? I want to show you why I avoid it. See, tie it and it's not comfy, so don't do it. Struggle even with the little tail to hide it in and to weave it in instead of tying the knot. It just doesn't feel good on your foot. when you wear socks like that. Of course, if you have no choice, you'll tolerate it, but try to avoid it as much as you can. That is why it's important while you're working on your project, leave long tails. Do not worry about cutting them close. That is going to create more trouble for you. The finishing and the trimming come at the very end. So you see how my sock is flat and comfy on all sides. I have one more place here to solve. You want to study it to see how stitches are going. So to close this gap, you will want to get the purple and to knit here with your sewing needle, of course, and then this one. Holding your one hand inside helps stretch the stitches so you see their paths. See how I'm coming from here, up, around, down. So now I need to come up here, up, around, and down. And you can easily jump to a lower round very quickly and smoothly. And turn it back on itself once. Turn it back on itself twice. You're flattened. And then come from the back, weaving through, making it flat. And by the way, when you're still getting used to this, move slowly. Touch with your finger, make sure it's feeling good, and if it's not exactly what you see me do here, it's okay. Just keep working and finding ways. That is how designers and knitters discover their own ways of doing things. Who knows, you might discover a new technique or your own easier approach to this one. The main goal is that your socks are comfortable, that you don't have big knots on the inside, and that the weavings are secured enough that the socks don't start to unravel, that you don't get holes. If you get holes, you can always come back and fix them, but that's not desirable, you would agree, I believe. All right, clean, neat work on the inside. Turn it inside out. You have beautifully finished teaching sock model that you can follow to remember the skills you learned in this process for our Sock Knitting 101 series. Join us for the future projects. Look for simple and beginner project in the title. Word simple, beginner. They will take you from here into the next steps of using patterns, following patterns, creating more defined socks that you can actually wear and gift. Look for intermediate and advanced patterns on the website with some custom designs and color work. And join us, and most importantly, have fun.